good to see you in London again, Jessica. You should visit more often. I know. Somehow I will try to find the time.
Emma!
Jane, I haven't seen you in ages. This is my cousin from the United States, Jessica Fletcher. Jessica, this is my friend and fellow actress, Jane Drury.
J.B. Fletcher?
Yes, I'm pleased to meet you.
I must say the resemblance between you is very striking.
Yes, we get that a lot. I consider it a compliment. Sit down, Jane, and join us. How have you been?
Well, not very good, to be perfectly honest. I'm so glad to have run into you. I need your help.
What's wrong?
I'd rather not say here. Meet me at the Milton Theatre this evening around 11 o'clock. I'll tell you then.
Something tells me your friend is in some sort of danger. Exactly what I was thinking. Tell me about Jane. How long have you known her? Longer than I'd care to admit. She used to be prominent on the British stage. Her most recent ex-husband, James Winslow, is the manager over at the Milton Theatre.
Good evening, ladies. The theatre's closed for the night.
James, is that you?
Emma McGill! I didn't even recognize you.
Jessica, this is James Winslow, who manages the Milton. And who was recently married to Jane?
Guilty as charged, I'm afraid.
Jane asked us to meet her here. Have you seen her?
No, the place is deserted. I was just locking up to go home myself.
Maybe she left us a note in her dressing room. We're a bit worried about her, actually.
All right, then. Follow me.
Jane! Oh, dear God!
Ladies, my name is, Jessica Fletcher, as I live and breathe.
Hello, Inspector Crimmins. It's good to see you again, though I wish it were under better circumstances. You remember my cousin, Emma McGill?
How could I forget? It was a case I'll not soon forget.
Nor shall I.
So you were the ones who found Miss Drury's body?
Yes, Miss Drury had asked us to meet her at the theatre at 11.
Did she say why?
No, but she seemed frightened of something. Or someone.
Well, let's have a look about, shall we? Well, the evidence suggests that Miss Drury took her own life.
I'm not so sure, Inspector. Did you see those marks around her neck? They don't look like rope marks. I think they were made by human hands. What are you saying, Jessica? That someone murdered Jane, and then set up the scene to make her death look like a suicide.
That certainly is a possibility.
What do you suppose it means that Jane received a letter from an influential member of Parliament?
I'm not certain, but I hope we can find out tomorrow from Mr. Watersford himself.
We?
I meant it when I said that I hadn't forgotten the case involving your cousin. You were a tremendous help to me then, as I'm sure you will be now.
Thank you, Inspector. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
It seems you were right about what you saw in Miss Drury's dressing room last evening. The medical examiner has confirmed that she was strangled and then hanged after she was dead.
Oh, dear.
I'm hoping that Mr. Watersford can shed some light on that empty envelope we found. Ah, here he is now.
Good morning, Inspector.
Crimmins, sir. And this is Mrs. Jessica Fletcher.
How may I help you?
I need to ask you a few questions about Jane Drury, an actress well known in the West End. Did you know her?
Just in passing. Why do you ask?
Last night she was found murdered in her dressing room at the Milton Theatre.
She's dead?
Yes, sir. We found an envelope addressed to Miss Drury from you in her dressing room. Did you, in fact, send her a letter?
Yes. I wrote simply to ask her how I might obtain some theatre tickets for a friend.
I see.
If you'll excuse me, I've got a meeting to attend.
Mr. Watersford seemed more deeply affected by the news of Jane's death than one would expect for a casual acquaintance.
Yes, I caught that too.
Emma and I are going back to Covent Garden. Something there frightened Jane, and we need to find out what, or who it was. The best chance we have to figure out what frightened Jane yesterday is to try and see through her eyes. It's worth a try, I suppose. This is right by the chair Jane was in. What do you see? I have a clear view of the last stool at the bar. Perhaps she saw someone she recognized then. Wonder if the bartender would remember who was seated there at the time. Excuse me, I wonder if you remember who was seated at the end of the bar yesterday around lunchtime.
Yeah, I remember who was there, but I didn't get his name. He asked me if he could leave his card. He should be around here somewhere.
I know exactly where the address on that business card is. Looks like that's our next stop. Are you Mr. Giles Badge Pie?
At your service.
A friend of mine, Jane Drury, has been murdered.
Oh, hell.
And we have reason to believe that you may have been following her.
Yes, I was observing her on behalf of a client.
And who is that client?
Sorry, I can't say. Client confidentiality. If you'll excuse me, I'll take this out in the hall.
Mr. Badgepie, we believe that the client who hired you to follow Jane is Tina Watersford. Would she be the wife of Nigel Watersford, member of the House of Commons?
How did you... Oh, forget it. Yes, I was working for her. Please excuse me. I'm a busy man.
I think Inspector Crimmins and I should pay a visit to Mrs. Watersford and find out why she hired Mr. Badgepie. She lives in a place called Wellinghall. Sounds very upscale.
May I help you?
Inspector Crimmins of Scotland Yard, Mrs. Watersford, and this is Mrs. Jessica Fletcher. You've heard, no doubt, of the murder of Miss Jane Drury?
Of course. Who hasn't?
We discovered that she was being followed by a private investigator named Giles Badgepie.
Is that so?
Yes, we paid Mr. Badgepie a visit and found out that the person who hired him was you, Mrs. Watersford.
Is that true?
Yes, it's true. I suspected that my husband was having an affair, so I hired Giles to find out more.
Was any evidence found to confirm your suspicions?
No.
Do you mind if we have a look round?
Not at all.
How do you explain this theater program, Mrs. Watersford? Jane, meet me at 2 p.m.?
If you must know, Giles brought that to me, and promised to provide me with the pictures of Jane and Nigel together next. But then Jane was killed.
So you don't know for sure what the meeting was about?
No, but I'm not an idiot, Mrs. Fletcher. Please excuse me. This has all been a bit much for me.
Mr. Watersford certainly didn't let on that he knew Jane that well the first time we spoke with him.
Typical politician. We'll see what he has to say for himself now. Mr. Watersford, may we have a minute?
More questions, Inspector. I told you I barely knew the unfortunate Miss Drury.
If that's true, why did you write your office address and a time across one of the playbills from Jane's performance?
I told you I wanted to buy some tickets for some friends, but the show was sold out for months. When she didn't respond to my letter, I asked her in person. She wrote down my address and agreed to have some tickets delivered then. Unfortunately, the tickets never arrived.
I see. Do you mind if we have a look around?
I've got nothing to hide.
Nigel lied when he said that the earring belonged to his wife. It matches the one Jane was wearing when we found her body.
My guess is he lied about that program note as well. Perhaps we can discover more about Jane's relationship with Mr. Watersford at her dressing room.
I'll call Emma to meet us there. I'm glad to help, but I'm not sure what we're looking for.
Something that reveals Miss Drury's relationship with Mr. Watersford.
Or at least something that can provide a new lead.
What's going on here?
Just having another look around the scene of the crime, Mr. Winslow.
Why were you insisting that Jane sign a contract with such unfavorable terms for her?
Look, I had no choice. The Milton isn't doing very well financially. I had to try and cut expenses.
Did the negotiations ever get heated?
At times, I suppose. Jane and I were used to fighting. We used to be married, after all.
I'll be taking the contract with me.
How long is this dressing room going to be sealed, Inspector? I'd like to be able to tell the theatre's charwoman when she can clean up the room for a new occupant.
The theater employs a regular cleaning lady.
Yes, she comes every night, around 9 p.m.
So Jane must have been killed sometime after 9 p.m., but before we arrived at 11 p.m.
That does narrow it down.
Giles Badgepie admitted that he was following Jane. I wonder if he has an alibi for that time.
Agreed. Let's pay him another visit tomorrow. The office is unlocked, but no one's here. Perhaps Mr. Badgepie stepped out.
With the rain coming down like it is, I'm sure he'll hurry back.
What are you people doing here?
We just had a few questions for you, Mr. Badgepie, such as where you were 2 nights ago between the hours of 9 and 11 p.m.
I was in a pub down on Exeter Street, waiting to meet with a client, but he never showed.
Mr. Badgepie, I noticed your wet footprints match the ones we found in Jane's dressing room the night she was killed.
So I was in her dressing room that night. I thought I'd find more evidence of her affair with Nigel Watersford, but she was already dead when I got there.
A likely story. I'm placing you under arrest for Jane Drury's murder.
You've got the wrong man, Crimmins. This is bigger than any of us.
There's no sign of the attaché case.
Inspector, I don't believe James was ignorant of Jane's relationship with Mr. Watersford.
Why is that?
Because the note from Nigel to Jane was found in James' office, but the envelope it came in was found in Jane's dressing room.
If the envelope was in her dressing room, it couldn't have been misdelivered.
So James knew that Jane and Nigel had a rendezvous planned on the day of the murder.
Perhaps Mr. Bajpai can tell us more. He's out on bail, but I'll have my men track him down. We have a few more questions for you, Mr. Bajpai.
In the course of following Miss Drury the day she was killed, you must have followed her to Nigel Waterford's office and seen her leave with an attaché case.
Yes. What's your point?
Did you also see something that would explain how she got away from Mr. Watersford's office so quickly?
Well, after I snapped the picture of Jane carrying the attaché case, I did see her get into a car that was waiting for her at the curb.
A taxi?
No, definitely a private car.
Did you manage to get a picture of it as well?
No such luck, but I think I can recall part of the license plate registration.
We'll take down what you remember and see if it turns up something in our database. I have backups of the databases here on CD-ROM. Now, where on earth did I put them? So the car Jane left in belongs to James Winslow, her ex-husband.
James must have known about the attaché case after all, since it was with Jane when he picked her up.
There's no sign of Mr. Winslow.
Good. I think we may learn more here without his help.
James, Yuri again. This is your last chance. If you want to discuss a deal, you need to meet me in Regent's Park with the merchandise by 10 o'clock tonight. No more stalling.
Still no sign of that attaché case.
Well, if the merchandise mentioned on that answering machine message is any indication, we won't find it here.
Apparently James neither has it nor knows where it is.
I disagree. I think James knows very well where it is. The answering machine message merely means he hasn't gone back to retrieve it yet. But we're running out of time to find it before he does.
But where could it be?
The only logical place is Giles Badgepie's office. Giles saw Jane with the attaché case, saw her get into a car driven by James with it, and he was in her dressing room later that evening. That must be when he took it.
Well, let's go have a look then.
There's an awful lot of mail here. Mr. Badgepie hasn't been here for a while.
Being arrested tends to make people rethink their lives.
The briefcase must be here. I'm certain of it.
Now where could it be?
Looking for this attaché case, Mr. Winslow?
I don't understand. How...
Because you and Jane were working together to steal top-secret information from Nigel Watersford.
I've never tried to do anything of the sort.
I'm sorry, James, but the fact that Mr. Badgepie saw you pick Jane up in your car after she stole the case from Nigel makes it difficult to believe that you are innocent in all of this.
Purely speculation. You have no evidence.
Actually, we do. We have your answering machine with a call on it that can be traced back to your buyer, Yuri.
Who is Yuri, James?
A Russian spy. I became friendly with him during our tour of the former Soviet Republic, back in my Shakespearean days. He offered to buy anything of value I could obtain.
You knew about Jane and Nigel's relationship, didn't you?
I did. And I knew that Nigel had access to valuable information. I told Jane if she could get her hands on any sensitive material from his office, I'd split the proceeds with her.
What happened the day that she took the attaché case?
I picked her up in front of Nigel's office as arranged, but Jane insisted on keeping the case in her possession and accompanying me to my meeting with Yuri.
But Jane regretted what she'd done, and when she spotted Emma and me at Covent Garden, she approached us for help. And when she spotted Giles watching her, it scared her off.
I knew she'd had second thoughts when she failed to meet me before our rendezvous with Yuri, so I went to a dressing room to look for her.
And found her dead?
Yes. I'm ashamed to admit I was actually more concerned about the attaché case. Before I could search for it, I heard someone coming, so I hid.
Did someone enter the room?
Indeed, it was Giles Badgepie. After he got over his shock at seeing Jane dead, I watched as he found the attaché case and left with it.
A perfect crime of opportunity.
I was trying to catch up to him when I ran into you at the theater.
Mr. Winslow, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, espionage charges, and very possibly murder.
Emma, it's me, Jessica. Do you know if Jane ever changed her name to Winslow after she married James? I see. I'm going to need your help with something.
Oh, hello. It's Ms. McGill, isn't it?
That's right, love, but you could call me Emma. May I have a word with you?
Of course.
My cousin just called to tell me that Jane's ex-husband, James Winslow, has been arrested. She said he was the one who put Jane up to stealing that attaché case from your husband, which has now been recovered.
So?
So, don't you see what a golden opportunity this is?
I'm afraid I don't.
I figure I can sell the story to the press. An actress seduces an influential member of Parliament and steals his secrets for her ex-husband. Story like that should be worth a tidy sum.
What does any of this have to do with me?
Well, because if you added your side of the story, it could enhance its value. You can tell all of England exactly what your deceitful husband was up to, so his tarnished reputation doesn't rub off on you.
I just don't know. I've got a fresh pot of tea ready. May I offer you a cup?
That would be lovely. I'll just wait right here then, shall I?
Ms. McGill, I'm afraid I can't make such a big decision so hastily.
I understand. I'll give you the rest of the day to think about it. But that's all the time I can spare. I'll be at the Milton Theatre at 10 o'clock tonight, waiting for your answer. Good evening, Mrs. Watersford. Thank you for coming.
Ms. McGill asked me to meet her here.
Actually, I was the one who wanted to talk to you. Emma merely arranged it so that you'd come.
Talk to me? About what?
About why you murdered Jane Drury?
You must be joking.
I'm not. The key was the handkerchief we found next to Jane's body. At first I assumed it was Jane's. After all, her most recent ex-husband's name is Winslow. But Emma confirmed for me that Jane never took James Winslow's last name and never had the initials J.W.
So?
So, once I realized that your name, Tina, was short for Justina, it made sense who had dropped the handkerchief in Jane's dressing room. And what other reason would you, Justina Watersford, have to be there except to confront the woman who was having an affair with your husband?
This is absurd. I'm not the only person with the initials J.W. It's obvious that James Winslow was the one who killed Jane. He was jealous of her affair with my husband.
I'm not so sure of that, Mrs. Watersford. I have one last thing to check.
All right. It's true. I was here because Giles told me that Nigel was having a relationship with Jane, and I wanted to put a stop to it. We argued, and then Jane said something that sent me right over the edge.
What did she say?
That Nigel said he couldn't wait to escape from our marriage. It confirmed what I had suspected for some time. Having this other woman throw it in my face made me lose all control, and I strangled her.
And when you realized she was dead, you tried to make the scene look like a suicide. You didn't know that first James and then Giles would come into the dressing room afterwards and find her dead.
I certainly didn't know they'd find her and then act like such fools to make themselves look guilty. And when each were arrested, well, neither would have been much missed.
That doesn't justify letting them take the blame for a murder you committed.
Maybe not, but with everything I have at stake, I'm not about to let that get in the way. And I'm not about to let you expose me as a murderer either.
That's enough, Mrs. Watersford.
Did you hear it all? Every last word.
Mrs. Watersford, you're under arrest for the murder of Jane Drury. Let's go.
Poor Jane. If only she'd been able to sit down and talk to us that day in Covent Garden. I know. Would things have turned out differently if she hadn't been scared off by the sight of Giles' badge pie? We'll never know for sure. I'm glad you were able to stay for Jane's memorial service. So am I. It was lovely. Jane will certainly be missed. But not forgotten. I've spoken with several of my friends in the West End. We're starting a scholarship fund in Jane's memory to help aspiring young actors go to drama school. What a wonderful idea! In a way, she's helping the next generation of actors and actresses follow in her footsteps. Well, you know what they say. The show must go on.